and welcome to another video. Today we're going to be going through all the books that I read in 2022. So if you'd like to see what I enjoyed and what I didn't enjoy, please stay with me and we'll go through my read books. So this particular shelf on my double bookshelf here is for all the books that I've read during the year. The goal is to get from one end to the other. So these are the physical books that I read in 2022. I also listened to a number of audiobooks, and these are the books that I have started and put down for various reasons, or I'm just plodding along very slowly through. But I thought that we would just quickly go through some questions, some things that I really enjoy hearing about before I split this up and put them into their categories. I have some books in my office, which is just behind me here, and I've got another classics shelf up here. I've got some general fiction. I've got all my memoirs down here. There are some books I will be also getting rid of, so I'll talk about those in a unhaul video for the first unhaul of 2023. I don't think I have many books, but I also want to talk about what I'm going to be doing with them. So I've written a list in my junk journal. On top of enjoying reading, I also journal and I write letters to friends. So I've just kind of written down a little list in my junk journal. I read 37 books in 2022. This is by far not all of them. As I mentioned, I have read some audiobooks. I do have some physical copies of the audiobooks I read, but for reasons of wanting to see what I've physically read, they're not down here. I've also read a number of children's books to my kids. I try to read to them a little bit, or like one chapter every night of a chapter book. They are nearly 3 and 4.5. And my 4.5-year-old in particular listens to every single word and asks so many questions. So sometimes it can literally take like 20 minutes, half an hour to get through one chapter. So I don't do it every night because it can be quite draining. But we have been currently reading a couple of chapter books as well, and we're currently through a couple more. So I just thought that I would go through my questions I wrote down and my answers, and I'll show you some of them. I'm not going to show you all of them because, as I mentioned, I will be unhauling some, so you'll see those in that video. And also I have had some wrap-up videos, not for every month, but I have had some in the past. So I'm not going to talk about all of them. So as I mentioned, I read 37 books. I read 27 of those physically, and I listened to 10 audiobooks. Few of those were rereads. I listened to Dracula on audio in October after having read it physically in March. So I'd actually read Dracula twice this year and adore it. This is one of my 5-star reads of the year. Another reread was Pride and Prejudice, which I listened to on audiobook as well, narrated by Rosamund Pike, and the BBC adaptation with Colin Firth in it is my absolute favourite TV show, short series, movie series, whatever you want to call it. It is my absolute comfort. If I am sick, guaranteed I'm going to binge watch Colin Firth on the couch. If anyone else is with me, let me know which is your favorite, whether it is the Keira Knightley Pride and Prejudice, which I refuse to watch because I've seen some clips and I don't like how they changed some of the main quotes, which made me fall in love with Colin Firth. But that is such a comfort read for me because I can picture every single scene from the BBC adaptation, and I've loved it since we were made to read it in high school. So I listened to that as a comfort read just to kind of lull me to sleep for a week. And then another audiobook I listened to, which was a reread, is The Secret Garden. It is one of my childhood favorites, and I hadn't read it in a while. I used to adore the movie as well, which I've probably not watched since I was about 12 or 13. So I'd love to try to find that online and watch that. I was a little bit let down by it, but I think also because I was listening to it on audiobook, I was getting distracted a little bit. So that was my 3rd reread of the year. I gave 8 books 5 stars this year, so I'm just going to pull them out a little bit. I don't want to make this video like half-hour long, so I will just tell you maybe a little bit about why I like it. So Dracula was my first book of the year and also my first 5-star read. It is, I can't even describe it. It is amazing. It is written in letter and journal format. So I have heard some people say that you either love it or you hate it. Some people find it very repetitive, but I really enjoy the letter and journal format because it really delves into the mindset of that person. So even though some of the information may be repeated, they may have a different take on it, and you can really kind of see where their strengths come from within this group of people that are out to get the baddie, Dracula. Another 5-star read for me was a short one. It only took me a little bit to read. It was The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. My copy is literally 18 pages long, but this is, I found it very emotional. I personally suffer from postnatal depression and anxiety, so I can 100% understand how a woman made to bed rest when her mind is going like that can be driven insane. I understand. I went straight into COVID lockdown 8 weeks after having my second child, and my husband was away, so I understand. Interesting read. If you suffer from any of that, can be a bit of a trigger warning, but I personally found it very informative in a way. Like, it kind of explained how my brain was working a little bit. Moving on, I've got a couple of 5-star reads here back to back. So the third one is a little known classic, and it was written just before World War II started, and it is essentially a warning on Nazism. So Address Unknown by Catherine Cressman Taylor was banned in many, many, many countries. If you read this, or if you have read this, let me know. The very, very last page of this book absolutely blew my mind. How the author had such insight prior to the war starting out is incredible, especially when you understand that she is an American, and all of the information that they were getting was word of mouth, because the Americans didn't think that the European issues within their countries were their problem until war started out. So this is very insightful, very impactful, very moving, very traumatic and horrific. But the last page, I sat there for a good 2 or 3 minutes afterwards with my jaw on the ground. Just amazing, amazing, amazing. If you enjoy war history, war information, war fiction, please read this. I read it in one sitting. It is extremely short, and it is also written in letter format. It is written between an American Jew and his German business partner who went back to Germany just before the Nazis started taking over. So please read. Straight after that, I read another book in one sitting, and that is the memoir of Eddie Jaku. It is called The Happiest Man on Earth. Eddie was a Holocaust survivor. He was a German Jew, so he was quite often accused of being either a Jew or a German. So his story is very confusing and very, very sad. However, he has managed, or had managed, to lead a positive life afterwards, rebuilding his life in Australia. He died at the age of 101. This book was published when he was 100. He did a TED Talk at the age of 98, which, by the way, made me bawl my eyes out. If you don't think you can read this, it is a short book. Just go watch his TED Talk on YouTube. It is very emotional, but he talks with such power. And this book is literally written as if you're sitting down to have a coffee with him and he is just telling you his life story. Very moving, very impactful, very sad, very insightful. Recommend this book. 2 other books that I gave 5 stars to are actually art-ish books. I've lost one. And they are The Sensation, The Boy, the Mole, the Fox and the Horse by Charlie Mackesy. And this is just a beautifully illustrated story. You can read it from cover to cover, but my favorite thing about this is you can literally open it up at any page and get some positive information or something that you may need to hear for the day. For instance, this one says, "Sometimes I worry you'll all realize I'm ordinary," said the boy. "Love doesn't need you to be extraordinary," says the mole. And that one in particular is such a beautiful reminder that people love you for who you are. Don't try to change yourself. And leading off from that one, I also read a parody of that. And I know there are quite a number of parodies of that book out at the moment. This one I found for $2 at my local wholesale bookshop, and it is called The Panda, the Cat and the Dreadful Teddy. Beware, this does have swear words in it. I found this hilarious and also relatable as a parent. So same thing, I kind of read it from front to back, but it is made so you can just flip to any page. I can't read that one. It just really made me giggle. There's also one in here, like Panda's just sitting down under a tree reading and someone's interrupting him and he's just like, F off, I'm reading. Or, you know, surely it's gin time. Don't tell me that is relatable as a parent. Anyways, and the very last 5-star book of the year for me was my old faithful, of course, Pride and Prejudice. I give it 5 stars every single time. So as I mentioned, I had listened to that as an audiobook. To the worst books of the year, I gave a couple of books 2-star and one book 1 star. The book I gave 1 star is Sweet Sweet Revenge Limited by Jonas Johansson. I was going to DNF it, but I just skimmed like the last half, and I think halfway through skimming I guessed the ending, so don't recommend that one. Do recommend his first novel, The 100-Year-Old Man Who Climbed Out the Window and Disappeared. This one is excellent. The other one, not so much. The books that I gave 2 stars to, the first one is Dacre Montgomery's poetry. The introduction was amazing. The poetry was horrible. So if it wasn't for the introduction, it would have been a 1 star. Sorry. Another book that I gave 2 stars, but deep down should be 1 star, is Beautiful World, Where Are You by Sally Rooney. I am not going to dwell on this because I've already had a rant, but I hate this book. The reason it got an extra star is because there were some interesting things mentioned in the email portions which had nothing to do with the story. Don't even get me started on that. But some of those were interesting and I want to follow up and just research those. Otherwise, it is going away. The second last one I gave 2 stars to is They Both Die in the End by Adam Silvera. This is a YA romance about 2 people that get together because they have been told they're going to die within 24 hours. I don't know why I tried YA. I find YA unrealistic and just ridiculous. And yeah, this was stupid. Sorry. The very last book that I gave 2 stars to, I don't actually have a physical copy of, and that is A Turn of the Screw by Henry James. I was very disappointed by that book, to be honest. I was expecting a lot more from a ghost story, and it was narrated by Emma Thompson, who is one of the best actresses of our time, and even she couldn't grab me into the story. So, sorry. If you like that one, I just didn't. Surprising books. I have 2 that really surprised me, 2. The first one was one that I found by accident, and that was Trial and Error by Anthony Berkeley. And, oh, I forgot to mention, this was also a 5-star book. I'm not sure how I forgot that, but this was also a 5-star and probably my most surprising book of the year. I found this at a secondhand bookshop when I was looking for Agatha Christie, and after reading this book and being totally blown away by it, I Googled Anthony Berkeley, and he was actually friends with Agatha Christie. So in a roundabout way, the universe directed me to this friend of Agatha's, and we had a great time. I will warn you, the first maybe half of it is a little bit hard to get into because it is setting up the whole book, and it was written in the 20s or 30s, so the English is a little bit more older English. It did take a little bit to get into, but once you hit the halfway mark, it is all downhill from there. And it essentially is about a gentleman, Lawrence Todhunter, who is trying to convince people that he murdered someone and no one believes him. And the epilogue in this, I had to scrape my jaw up off the floor. I was not expecting that twist in the epilogue, and I was sitting there giggling to myself like a little girl. Please find yourself a copy of this. Please push through the first half and enjoy the second half. It was well worth it. The second book that I found most surprising this year was the last one that I read, and I actually finished this on the 31st of December. What month are we in? We're in January. Oh my goodness. This one was gifted to me. I was a rep for a company called Novelty Book Club, and every month I got sent a Penguin Orange Classic along with some tea and some other little bits and pieces, like a bookmark that matches. I'll leave their information below if you want to go check them out. But The Day of the Triffids by John Wyndham, and this was really, really good. It took me by surprise. It's a science fiction post-apocalyptic killer plants on the loose. But underneath it all, it's also a story about survival and love. And even though the first half of the book, the chapters were quite long-winded, it was also very fast-paced. Towards the end of the book, the chapters get noticeably shorter, so you kind of feel the book wrapping up, and it ends the way it should, but I was expecting a little bit more. But all in all, this is not a book that I would have ever picked up by myself. And as soon as it arrived in my mailbox, I started reading it because it just sounded extremely interesting. Do recommend this one if you're a fan of science fiction and like apocalyptic, post-apocalyptic situations or pandemic situations. Very, very interesting. I will be trying to look for more John Wyndham books to read. I thoroughly enjoyed this one. Very surprising for me. Two of the most disappointing books of the year. Well, I mean, we already know which is my most disappointing book of the year, and that is Most Beautiful World, Where Are You? But my second most disappointing book of the year was Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen. I was expecting a lot more from this. It has strong female characters. Eleanor is a strong character, and a lot of people love this book. But I hated the ending. The whole story was leading up, building up, and then it just felt like nothing. The characters settled. And to me, that is uncharacteristic of Jane Austen's writing. I don't even know how to explain it. I just felt like Jane Austen settled for what the society at the time would have wanted out of this, and I did not enjoy it as a modern reader. I was fully expecting Eleanor to be paired with someone else towards the ending, and I was very disappointed when it didn't happen, because I almost feel like Eleanor didn't get true happiness, and neither did the male character. They kind of both just went into relationships that were a bit ho-hum. So that's my personal opinion. If you have a different opinion, let me know below, or if you agree with me, let me know. I seem to be on the very minority of this one as well. The third Jane Austen book that I read this year was Mansfield Park, which is apparently one of her least favorites, and I loved that one. It was a 4-star read for me, and to me that was kind of like a fairy tale in a way. A lot of complaints about that particular book is that the main character doesn't have Jane Austen's normal strong female lead, but she is very strong in her own way, in my opinion, and the way that she is strong is standing up for her morals and beliefs and really sticking to them. And there's a lot of like evil stepsister type behavior and evil aunt behavior going on, and she has to overcome all of these things. So in my opinion, she's very strong, and in the end she did get her Prince Charming. So that one was amazing. Sense and Sensibility let me down. I read 2 poetry books this year. One is Dacre Montgomery's poetry, and the second one is A Goblin Market by Christina Rossetti, which was published in the late 1800s. This is a a fairy tale in the format of a poem. This particular edition is stunning. It is illustrated throughout. That one I can't wait to read to my children. I think that was a beautiful poem. I read 3 art books this year, which 2 I've already mentioned in my 5-star reads. The third one is What the Bleep Is This by Celeste Mountjoy. She is a Melbourne artist and has pretty much kind of put her memoir into art format, and I've lent that one out a few times. It was a bit triggering for one of my friends who was groomed as a child, but it is also a coming of age and how to deal with womanhood, and it was interesting. Didn't always relate to me, but I did find it very interesting, and very thankful that Celeste decided to share her experiences. So I think that is the majority of the big things I wanted to talk about. As you can see, there are some other books here. I read quite a few books as part of a book club on Goodreads. It is called Book Addicts, I believe. And I've also started the Thursday Murder Club series, you can see here. But those were kind of the main points that I wanted to discuss. If you do have any questions about what I thought about any of these other books you saw here, please do ask me in the comments below, or you can seek me out on Instagram as well at Beck and the Books. I'll be dispersing these. I'll be doing a bit of an unhaul, and we will be starting afresh very, very soon. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.